And so the silence you've been carrying finds its echo here, because somewhere in the hush between desire and fulfillment, something ancient is whispering, a current moving beneath your surface world, older than the language you use to name it. You feel it, don't you? That gentle ache behind your longing, that holy unrest that keeps tugging at the corners of your reality, as though something, someone, is trying to be remembered. Most assume this ache is lack, that their yearning is proof of separation, distance, emptiness. But the divine truth is stranger than that. It is not absence calling to be filled. It is fullness pressing inward, begging to be seen. The prayer you are about to remember is not a request. It is not a plea or petition to some power above you. It is not uttered in desperation, but in stillness. It is the language of identity, a declaration, quiet and resounding, of what already is. And you've prayed it before, not once but 1,000 times, though you may not have known. Every assumption you hold is a prayer. Every inner conversation a living altar. Every time you say I am, you draw from the wellspring of this holy incantation. You are not here to get riches. You are here to awaken the truth that you are already rich, rich in being, rich in possibility, rich in the unbroken supply of your own divine imagination. Because the ancient prayer that unlocks hidden riches is not hidden in the stars or buried in the earth. It lies curled within the folds of your own self-concept. It is the whisper you speak to yourself when no one is listening. It is the name you wear in the secret places of your mind. I am. Those two words are not mere grammar. They are the creative voice of God. When Moses stood trembling before the burning bush, wondering by what authority he should speak, the voice thundered back, not with titles or threats, but with simplicity that split the heavens. I am, that I am. Exodus 3:14, and that same I am burns within you now. You do not need to beg. You do not need to wait. You do not need to earn. You simply assume the identity that matches the reality you desire. This is the mystery most overlook. They chase effects, not causes. They rearrange shadows, but forget the light. They try to manifest money, while still wearing the garment of one who lacks. And so the riches remain hidden, not because they are denied, but because they are misnamed. But you are remembering. The ancient prayer is not something you say, it is something you become. When you sit in silence and dare to feel what it would feel like if your desire were already true, when you enter the state of the wish fulfilled, not as a dreamer hoping, but as a creator knowing, you are praying the most sacred prayer of all, because God does not respond to words. God is the Word, and that Word is made flesh in you each time you embody your assumption. You close your eyes, you feel the scene, you breathe in the knowing, you let the outer world fall away, and inhabit the world within. That is the temple, that is the Holy of Holies, that is where the veil is torn. And as you persist in this unseen reality, as you nourish it with faith and repetition and stillness, the outer world conforms, not because you forced it, but because you allowed it. The seed planted in imagination must bear fruit in time. But what if even this is only the beginning? What if the riches you seek are not gold or goods, but something far older, something buried not in vaults, but in vision? What if the treasure you unlock is not just supply, but sovereignty? What if the prayer has a second half, one most forget to listen for, and it changes everything? And as that question begins to form within you, something stirs, not in the world outside, but in the deep sacred stillness within, where thought falls silent and being begins to speak. Because the second half of the prayer is not spoken aloud, it is felt into being, and only those with ears tuned inward ever truly hear it. You see, most recite I am as if it were a doorway, but they forget to walk through it. They declare the name, but do not wear the nature. They touch the hem of the garment, yet never enter the fullness of the robe. But you are beginning to remember what this means. To say I am is to awaken the first fire of creation, but to follow it with assumption, to choose and become the thing believed, is to complete the circuit. It is not just identity, it is embodiment, not just recognition, but resurrection. You do not receive riches, you resurrect them from the invisible, and the power to do so has never left you. This is why Jesus, the pattern man, spoke not of trying, but of being. When ye pray, believe that ye receive them, and ye shall have them. Not believe that you might, but believe that you have. This is not future tense, this is eternal presence, and presence is the only tense of God. So what are you believing now? Not what do you want, or hope or plan, but what are you in this moment, assuming to be true of yourself? Because this is the living prayer. Every moment, you are praying, not with your lips, but with your state. Every inner dialogue, every feeling you permit to linger, every identity you wrap around your sense of self, this is your prayer, not once at night on your knees, but continuously, as the hidden vibration behind all you do. And this prayer does not beg for riches, it breathes them. It knows that to seek supply is to assume lack, and that assumption is the only sin, not moral failure, but imaginative misalignment. To sin is to fall short in imagination, to miss the mark of divine perception. But there is no condemnation in truth, only correction, and you correct it not by effort, but by entering again the state that knows, the state that sees what the eyes do not, the state that feels reality into form. So you close your eyes, and the world melts away. You do not fight your current condition, you do not argue with the facts, you let them be, like shadows passing on the wall, and instead you return to the living substance of things hoped for, the knowing beneath the noise. You feel it, quietly. You allow yourself to become the one who already has, not later, not someday, but now, rich, secure, radiant, not in theory, but in felt reality, not through striving, but through surrender, because the ancient prayer is not answered in noise, it is answered in stillness. And as you dwell in that assumption, as you rest there, night after night, returning to it as to your home, the world outside must conform, not because you manipulate it, but because it has no choice. The outer is the servant of the inner, and you are the master it obeys, whether you realize it or not. You are not becoming rich, you are remembering that you already are, and all that remains is for that remembrance to take shape. But what if this is more than money? What if the riches are not just in form, but in freedom? What if the true treasure is not stored in vaults, or written on checks, but hidden in states of being waiting to be claimed? And if the treasure is a state, not a thing, then every desire you've ever held has been a coded memory, not a reaching for what you lack, but a quiet echo of what you already are, clothed in the language of form, so you might remember your own name. You were never chasing money, or safety, or recognition. You were reaching for a version of yourself that already exists in eternity, waiting to be assumed, because assumption is not pretending, it is remembering. It is the sacred act of inhabiting the truth beneath appearances. You do not become rich by forcing wealth into your world, but by no longer denying its presence within you. This is the shift most miss. They try to do their way into abundance. They study, strive, accumulate technique, but remain lodged in the state of one who is still trying, still waiting, still becoming, and so the treasure stays buried. But the one who remembers, the one who assumes the end, and rests in it with the deep stillness of certainty, that one moves mountains without lifting a finger. You are not here to chase gold, you are here to realize that gold chases its own image, and that image is formed within. The world reflects your innermost identification, not once, not sometimes, but always. The mirror does not lie, it only delays when the gaze within remains divided. So the ancient prayer whispers again, I am. What follows that phrase is your world in seed. Whether you speak it aloud or not, you are finishing that sentence with every emotion, every posture of mind, every inner picture you accept as true. I am struggling, I am waiting, I am hoping, or I am rich, I am full, I am the child of the infinite, clothed in abundance, and crowned with glory. And the world answers, yes, beloved, as you have said, so shall it be. This is why the Lord does not care about what you want. It is not governed by longing, it is governed by being. You do not manifest what you desire, you manifest what you believe yourself to be. And belief in this context is not mere thought, it is the total inner acceptance of a state, your emotional dwelling place, the home you return to without effort, the self you feel as natural. So ask not, how do I get this, but who am I being in relation to it? Am I being the one who waits, or the one who already has? Am I being the seeker, or the finder? Am I praying from separation, or from union? Because hidden riches do not respond to effort, they respond to assumption, not forced belief, but quiet embodiment. The moment you claim the state, truly feel it as yours, all things begin moving to reflect it. And this is not fantasy, this is law. Feel the simplicity of it now. You do not need to fix the world, You need only fix your attention in the end, not just with words, but with feeling, with identity, with the still assurance that what is imagined in faith will be made visible in time. Let that sink in, not as an idea, but as breath, as truth, as being. The one who walks through the world clothed in riches internally, though the outer shows lack, that one is more powerful than the wealthiest man who fears losing what he has, for consciousness, not circumstance, is the true storehouse, and you are the keeper of that vault. So you rest there now, not to get, but to know, not to strive, but to remember, and as you do, something begins to unfold, a deeper secret the world does not teach, because what if even your desire was never random? What if the riches you've longed for were never outside of you, but placed within you as a divine breadcrumb, pointing back to the self you were always meant to reclaim? And if the breadcrumb was divine, then your desire is not an accident, but a map, a sacred thread woven into your being before the foundation of the world, a compass pointing home, not to some distant treasure, but to the treasure buried in your own name, the one you forgot when you began to believe in the outer more than the inner, in appearances more than essence, because hidden within every desire is a revelation of self. You do not truly want the thing, you want to become the version of yourself who has no distance from it, and that version already exists, now, in the eternal present. Your task is not to create it, but to select it, to identify with it fully, to step into it as you would a familiar robe, one that fits not because you earned it, but because it was always yours. This is the secret function of desire. It calls you, not to striving, but to selection, and selection is the sacred act of assumption. You assume the end, not because you see evidence, but because you are the evidence. You choose it in consciousness, and you walk in it inwardly until the world has no choice but to catch up. The harvest may appear slow, but the seed is already sown. So you move through your world as one who knows. You touch nothing in panic. You reach for nothing in desperation. You close your eyes, and you feel the prayer already answered, not by force, but by remembrance, because what you are calling riches are only symbols, mirrors of state, and the state is what matters, the feeling of already being, the internal knowing of fulfillment, without waiting for confirmation. This is the mystery of living in the end. You do not visit the desired state for a moment, like a traveler passing through. You dwell in it. You make it your habitation. You bring your senses into alignment with it. Taste, touch, sound, all imagined vividly until it becomes more real than what the outer eyes can see, and the world begins to bow, not in submission, but in reflection. You find yourself led by invisible bridges of incident, encounters, ideas, inspiration. The path you could not have planned unfolds beneath your feet, but it is not your doing, it is the doing of your assumption, the quiet authority of a being who has remembered their place. And as you walk in this new state, you discover that the true treasure was never the money, never the things, but the return to power, the shift from hoping to knowing, from seeking to being, from wandering to reigning. For you are not a beggar at the gates of the divine, you are the divine, dreaming of limitation, and now beginning to awaken. And yet, there is something even more beautiful hidden in this remembrance, for once you learn to assume the riches of the world, you begin to sense a deeper richness, a wealth not of things, but of states, of peace, of joy, of quiet majesty that cannot be spent or taken. What is gold compared to the feeling of knowing who you are? What is silver beside the certainty of divine union? And still, paradoxically, when you no longer chase the form flows easily, because you are no longer trying to become the one who has, you are being the one who is. This is the prayer that unlocks, not because it convinces God, but because it is God, in motion within you. And yet, even as this truth settles, something deeper stirs, a sacred tension, a veil thinning, as if the very nature of assumption is tied not only to identity, but to something even more mysterious, memory. And if assumption is the act, then memory is the root. Not memory as you've known it, not the recollection of events fixed in the past, but memory as a divine unveiling, a remembering forward, not backward, a sacred recognition of a reality that already is waiting only for your agreement. For the soul remembers what the mind has forgotten. It knows the state before the form. It knows the treasure before the seeking. And when you assume a thing, when you feel it into being, you are not fabricating, you are remembering, you are peeling back the veil of appearances to behold what has always been true in God. that you were never poor, that you were never separate, that you have never for a single instant been outside of the kingdom. What we call manifestation is nothing more than selective memory. You recall the state of fullness until the shadows around you dissolve into agreement. This is the real prayer, not a cry into the void, but a steady inward gaze, a soft sustained remembering of who you already are, the child of the Most High, the Word made flesh, the living temple of the one power that shapes all. And as this truth rises within, the old story begins to fade, the story of struggle, of waiting, of not enough. It unravels quietly, not with force, but with revelation, because light does not fight the dark, it simply enters. So let that light enter now, not in flashes of effort, but in waves of remembrance, in the holy quiet of knowing, I and my Father are one, John 10:30. And if you are one with the source of all, how could anything ever be withheld? You do not need to prove this with your senses. You prove it in your posture, in the way you sit inwardly, in the way you walk through each day, as though the promise were already fulfilled, because the world cannot help but mirror what you truly accept. And here is where the richness deepens. Most wait for the world to change, so they can feel differently. But you change your feelings so the world must follow. You move first in imagination, that sacred place where all things begin, and you stay there, not as an act of will, but as an act of devotion. Devotion to truth, devotion to self, devotion to the God within. This inner movement, this quiet claiming, is not noticed by others, but it is thunder in the heavens. It is the real work, the only work, and it is done in silence. As you return again and again to the state of the wish fulfilled, the outer begins to shift, sometimes subtly, sometimes swiftly, but always, the response comes, because the prayer has been heard, not by a distant deity, but by the divine law that is your own being, and so you rest in it. You let the feeling settle, like oil upon the water. You let it clothe you, invisibly at first, and then inevitably, in form. But the deeper you go, the more you'll sense it, that what you truly desire isn't the thing itself, it's the self you become in having it, the peace, the confidence, the freedom, and those qualities, they don't have to wait. You can put them on now, like a garment. You can walk in them, speak from them, breathe through them, and when you do, when you remember forward into who you truly are, then everything else, all forms, all symbols of wealth, simply rise to meet the truth already alive within you. Yet even in that peace, something stirs beneath the surface still, a quieter mystery, hidden deeper within the seed of imagination, a sacred question waiting to be asked, not how you receive, but why you forget. And as that quiet question takes shape, not how, but why, a deeper silence answers. Why do you forget? Again and again, the riches already within your reach. Why, after tasting the truth, do you return to the shadows? Why does the feeling fade, the assumption loosen, the memory dim? The answer lies not in weakness, but in the mystery of sleep. All creation begins in sleep, not the sleep of the body, but the slumber of identity, the descent into forgetfulness, into limitation, into the appearance of separation. This is not a punishment, it is the divine play of remembrance, the falling away, so that you might awaken again and know your power. It was never about earning your way back, it was always about waking up. You forget not because you are broken, but because forgetting is the veil that makes remembering meaningful. The pearl of great price only glows when you uncover it with your own hand. So each time you drift back into doubt, each time you slip into old assumptions, feel the lack, and believe in the outer once more. Even that is sacred, even that is part of the journey, not a failure, but a calling, a whisper to return home again. And when you do return, when you reclaim the end, inhabit the state, breathe the prayer, you do so with more clarity, more surrender, more grace. The forgetting makes the remembering sharper, the silence deepens the sound. This is why no effort is wasted. Every time you revise the story, every time you inhabit the wish fulfilled, even for a moment, you reshape the unseen clay of your world. And though the outer seems unchanged, the seed has split, the roots are forming beneath the soil of time,
Be patient with yourself in this. Do not curse the night. Do not rush the process, for even in the pause, even in the quiet, the law is still at work. Consciousness never sleeps, and what you accept in feeling, even once, begins to move through unseen channels toward expression. So when you forget, when the old assumptions creep back in, do not fight them. Do not condemn yourself. Simply notice, and return. Close your eyes, enter again the inner temple, speak the sacred words, not with your mouth, but with your mood, I am, and finish the sentence with the state you choose, not to impress, not to convince, but to remember, to dwell. You do not need to feel it perfectly, you need only to accept it quietly. Faith is not emotion, it is stillness, a deep inner yes, and in time, sometimes gently, sometimes suddenly, the outer world yields, it bends to reflect your inner dominion. The call is always answered, because the call is made from within the law itself. This is why you never need to rush, never need to force. You need only persist in the assumption, until it feels natural, until it no longer feels like pretending, but like truth. And it will. The more you return to it, the more real it becomes, not because the world changed, but because you did. Your self-concept shifted, and with it, the entire mirror of reality. This is the rebirth spoken of in every scripture, not a change of behavior, but a change of identity, a return to the original prayer, the sacred I am, spoken now with remembrance, not fear. And yet, even as the veil lifts, another veil waits just behind it, because what if the riches you assume, the desires you name and clothe in feeling, are themselves symbols? What if even the golden outcomes are shadows cast by a higher light, one that beckons you not just to receive, but to become?
And if the riches are only symbols, then what they point to is far more precious than what they are. Gold glitters, but it is the light within you that gives it meaning. The house, the car, the overflowing account, they shimmer in the world of form, but they are not the treasure. They are reflections, mirrors held up to show you what you are beginning to embody, because the true wealth is not in the thing possessed, but in the self that knows no absence. This is the turning point, quiet, inward, yet infinite, where you no longer assume for the sake of the object, but for the sake of the identity it calls forth. The state that holds the form is greater than the form itself, for it is eternal, unshakable, independent of outer weather. And yet how few are willing to dwell there, to live not for evidence, but for essence, to assume without needing the world to bow instantly, to move in the quiet certainty that the unseen is the only truth, and the seen is but its shadow. But you are beginning to dwell there now. Feel the difference in your inner posture, not straining, not reaching, but remembering, not trying to get, but resting in being. And from that rest, all things arise. This is what it means to live in the end, not merely to visualize the outcome, but to surrender so completely to the state of already having, that there is nothing left to ask for. You become the answer. You become the fulfilled prayer. You become the embodied Amen. And as this inner identity stabilizes, your outer world begins to change its costume. The old roles fall away. People show up differently. Resources appear where before there were only locked doors. But these are not miracles. These are echoes. The miracle happened the moment you assumed, and yet something deeper begins to take root. A holy ache, not for things but for truth. A pull not toward possession, but toward embodiment. You begin to ask not just what can I receive, but who can I become? And this is the real unlocking, because hidden behind every prayer for wealth is a call to become the self who needs nothing, lacks nothing, waits for nothing. Not cold detachment, not spiritual bypass, but divine fullness, a radiant beingness so whole, so rich in itself, that the world becomes a dance, not a test. You bless the riches as they come, and they will come, but you are not mastered by them. You no longer build your temple on shifting sands. Your temple is within, and it cannot be shaken. This is the promise, that as you seek first the kingdom, the state of God realization within, all these things shall be added unto you. And what is that kingdom, but your own imagination, your own assumption, your own holy I am, chosen and rested in? So you return to it again tonight, not with effort, but with surrender, not to create, but to remember. You let the outer fall away, like a dream fading in morning light, and you dwell, even for a moment, in the feeling of already being, already whole, already rich, already home. and in that stillness, something ancient stirs beneath the surface, not a new idea, but a very old one too long forgotten in the noise of the world, a sacred law, etched into the very design of consciousness, waiting to be known, not just with the mind, but with the heart. And as that ancient stirring rises through the stillness, it begins to shape itself into language, not new words, but remembered ones. Words that feel like home, words etched into the marrow of your being, before you ever learned to speak. Because long before you sought to understand the law, you were the law in motion, and even now, it breathes through you, quietly, faithfully, without demand. The law of consciousness, that what you assume to be true becomes flesh, that your world is yourself pushed out. You've felt it before, haven't you? That uncanny unfolding. The moment something you dared to feel, dared to believe without evidence, begins to shimmer into view, not by your striving, but by your surrender. The way a reflection forms not by effort, but by still water. It's always been this way. You are not separate from the creative power. You are not its servant. You are its expression. The ancient law is simple, though veiled in mystery, as within, so without. But this is not about fixing what's within. It's about claiming it, assuming it, resting in the knowing that you are already that which you seek. You do not need to improve yourself to access it. You only need to stop denying that it's already yours, and that denial, subtle and persistent, is the great thief. Not in loud rejection, but in quiet self-concepts that whisper, not yet, not me, not this life. But you were never meant to wait. You were never meant to shrink yourself into what the world could explain. You are the light of the world, clothed in form for a little while, sent here not to earn riches, but to reveal them. And revelation is the fruit of assumption. When you assume the feeling of the wish fulfilled, when you wear the end like a second skin, you open the gates of heaven, not a heaven above, but a heaven within, the kingdom that has always been yours, awaiting only your consent. Fear not, little flock, for it is your Father's good pleasure to give you the kingdom. Luke 12:32. It is not withheld, it is not distant, it is already given. But you must take it, not by force but by faith, not by asking, but by assuming. The law is no respecter of persons. It yields to your inner conviction, whether you assume lack or abundance, fear or favor. The law responds with impartial precision. It cannot betray itself. It reflects you faithfully, perfectly, even when you wish it wouldn't. This is the invitation, not to plead with the world, but to awaken to your authorship of it. Every scene, every conversation, every dollar and door, all reflections of your sustained state, not your fleeting wish, but your dwelling place. So where do you live inwardly? What do you accept, night after night, in the sanctuary of your imagination? That is your prayer, that is your command, and you can change it now. You can revise, you can shift, you can rest in a new end, and make it your home. You do not need to explain how. You do not need to know when. You need only enter and persist. The outer will catch up. It always does. But this time, let the shift not come from fear, but from freedom. Let it be gentle, like drifting into sleep. Let it be soft, like the turning of a page. No striving, no proving, just the sacred yes of a soul, remembering itself. And as you rest in that yes, as you wear the state like breath, something extraordinary begins to unfold. Not louder, but deeper, a realization that turns the whole world inward, the truth that even others in your world are part of this prayer, and they too are moved by the hand of your assumption. And as the world turns inward, so do the faces within it. You begin to see it now, how even those you once believed were separate, with minds and motives of their own, are not outside your prayer, but inside it. They are drawn by the quiet gravity of your assumption. They play their parts, unknowingly obedient to the roles you've cast for them, in the theater of your inner world. This is not control, it is not manipulation, it is the mystery of reflection. You do not change others by will, you change your conception of them. You see them anew, not as they have been, but as they are in the end you now dwell in, and they rise to meet it. If you believe someone resists you, they must resist you. If you assume they favor you, support you, bless you, even if by all reason they should not, they must respond in kind, for they are not fixed. They are fluid, shaped by your inner relationship to them. The law does not govern others, and then you. It governs you, and others reflect that law, as it plays out through your states. This is the holy secret of inner conversations, not idle thoughts, but living declarations. Every word you speak within, every imagined dialogue, is a seed sown into the fertile soil of your future. Whether you speak of reconciliation or rejection, harmony or lack, your world listens, it remembers, and you've been speaking for a long time without knowing it. The repeated inner arguments, the silent rehearsals of failure, the whispered fears you never spoke aloud, they too have shaped what you call your reality. But now the prayer changes. Now you become deliberate. You use the voice within as a sculptor's tool. You assume love where it was once absence, favor where there was resistance, generosity where there had been delay, not because the outer has proven it, but because the inner has claimed it. You speak to others within as you wish them to be, not to flatter, but to faithfully assume. You hear them congratulate you, affirm you, bless you. You imagine their faces softened in kindness, their words echoing the fulfillment of your new state, and the world obeys, perhaps not immediately, perhaps not by the person you imagined, but the vibration does not vanish. It gathers, it flows through unseen channels, until it must find expression. You don't make it happen, you don't chase, you dwell. You trust the law to do what the law always does, reflect your inner world in perfect detail, and suddenly people change, conversations shift, opportunities open, not because they've changed of their own accord, but because you have moved to a different dwelling place in consciousness, and they followed. This is why forgiveness is not a moral requirement, it's a spiritual key. You forgive not to excuse another, but to release yourself from the cycle of reproducing the same version of them. When you revise the past in your imagination, when you see it as it should have been, and feel it real, you break the chain of repetition. You free yourself from the assumption of betrayal, of lack, of conflict, and the other is released too, even if they never understand how or why, because no one is against you. There is only you, mirrored back. So you bless them all, not outwardly, but inwardly. You see them rightly, through the lens of the end you now occupy. You speak only what you wish to live. You listen only to the voices that affirm your new identity, and the rest fades like mist in morning light. And here in this sacred silence, the ancient prayer deepens, because if your inner word shapes the faces around you, if your assumption reshapes the players in your world, then what of time? What of the past that seems fixed in stone? What if even that could be reimagined and rewritten? And if the future bends to assumption, what if the past does, too? What if time itself is not the straight line you've believed it to be, but a circle of infinite entrances, each moment alive, not dead, waiting to be revisited by the power of your attention? Because memory is not passive, it is creative, and what you remember, and how you remember, determines the shape of your now. You do not merely recall events, you resurrect them, and this is the hidden jewel, buried in the prayer, that the law governs not only what is to come, but what already has been. The past is not fixed in stone, it is written in imagination, and imagination is the only reality. So you are not bound by what was, you are bound only by what you continue to accept as having been. This is the quiet wonder of revision, a sacred act of mercy, a divine rewriting of scenes long gone, not to deny them, but to redeem them. You do not argue with the facts, you do not pretend the pain never happened, you simply choose a higher outcome in consciousness, and dwell there until it feels more real than the wound. You enter that moment again, not with bitterness, but with love. You see the conversation rewritten, the door opened, the apology spoken, the opportunity granted, the harmony restored, and you feel it, as though it had always been this way. And that feeling, soft and sincere, begins to undo the hold of the former scene, not because the outer has changed yet, but because you have changed your agreement with it. And as within, so without, the world will shift to reflect your new arrangement with the past. Perhaps the same people return, transformed. Perhaps others arrive in their place. Perhaps the opportunities once missed reappear in subtler forms. But the echo will come, because the prayer was heard. Though your sins be as scarlet, they shall be white as snow. Isaiah 1:18. This is not a promise of punishment avoided, but of perception transfigured, of memory purified through assumption. You are not at the mercy of what happened. You are at the mercy of what you continue to believe about what happened. And belief is choice. So choose now to revise, to bless, to release the old tale, not because it wasn't real in form, but because it is no longer true in identity. You are not the one who failed.
You are not the one who failed. You are not the one who lost. You are not the one who was left behind. You are the one who has returned to the garden, who has stepped back into the state where all is well, where nothing is missing, where the crooked paths are made straight. And as you revise the past in feeling, the riches you once believed delayed begin to move swiftly toward you, for you have removed the inner block, the silent no that was still echoing beneath your outer yes. Now the whole being is aligned. Now the prayer is whole, and with each revised memory, each scene lovingly reimagined and felt, your state changes, not just your story, but your foundation. And from that new foundation, all assumptions become easier, all ends become nearer, and just beneath that ease, beneath the warm glow of spiritual authority, another realization waits in silence. If you can revise your past and choose your future, then who is the one choosing? Who is the I am behind the story, the one writing the prayer? And if you can choose the past and shape the future, then you are not bound to either. You are not a character moving through time. You are the one holding the script, the author behind the curtain, the still presence from which all movement flows. This is the deeper unveiling of the prayer, not what to ask for, or how to receive, but who you truly are, because the riches are not the answer, the self who commands them is. And when you trace the I am to its source, not the name, not the claim, but the awareness that speaks it, you begin to touch the edge of eternity, that still radiant center within you, where there is no before and after, no lack, no distance, only being, pure, silent, full. That is the real gold. Everything else, the money, the relationships, the opportunities, they are ornaments, adornments, symbols dancing around the altar of your self-concept. They come, not because you chase them, but because you remember who you are, and let the world reflect it. This is the mystery hidden in plain sight. You are not becoming powerful. You are remembering your power. You are not evolving into wealth. You are waking up from the dream of poverty. And when you truly rest in that awareness, when you no longer look outside to measure your worth, the outer begins to shimmer, not because it has changed, but because you have opened your eyes. You see now that consciousness is the only cause, that assumption is the only door, that imagination is the only altar upon which the prayer is heard and answered. And so you pray, not with words, but with identity. You enter the state of the wish fulfilled, not because it's logical, but because it's law. You inhabit it without effort, until it feels more natural than the old state you once called home. And when it feels natural, it becomes visible. But this process is not mechanical. It is sacred, intimate, alive. You are not a machine rehearsing affirmations. You are the living God imagining creation into form. And that imagination is not idle. It is law. Whatever you feel is true, persists. Whatever you accept as identity, multiplies. And so the invitation is not to struggle, it is to yield, to lay down the old garments of striving and step barefoot into the temple of your own being. Here you find that you never needed permission, you never needed to be chosen, you only needed to assume the end and walk in it inwardly, until the outer yielded in recognition, because you are not praying for riches, you are praying from riches. You are not calling down blessings, you are allowing what already belongs to you to rise from within. And the more you rest in that state, not as a technique, but as a return, the more the veil thins, the more clearly you hear the soft voice behind every assumption, whispering not what you should become, but what you already are. And yet, even as this knowing deepens, another layer begins to reveal itself, a gentler mystery still waiting beneath the gold. Because what if the true power of the prayer is not just to create, but to commune? What if the riches are not only in what you manifest, but in who you walk with, in stillness, as you manifest it? And if you are not only creating, but communing, then the prayer is not just a tool, it is a relationship, a silent walk with the infinite within you, a holy companionship with the one who hears before you speak, answers before you ask, and moves the heavens through your slightest feeling. You are not alone in the act of assumption. You are not isolated in your imagining. The God you call upon is not separate from the one who calls. There is no distance here, only union. I am with you always, even unto the end of the world. Matthew 28:20. And this I is not a distant Lord looking down. It is the great I am at the center of your being, the presence that breathes you, knows you, walks beside you, and is is you. So the moment you enter the state of the wish fulfilled, something deeper is also happening. You are not just claiming an outcome, you are stepping into communion. You are walking with God, not as a follower, but as a son, a daughter, a mirror. In this stillness, your assumptions become sacred offerings, not demands, not bargains, but gentle acknowledgments of what has already been given. You are not informing the universe of what you need. You are remembering, through feeling, what is already yours in the eternal. And this remembrance is worship. You do not beg for riches. You behold the richness of your own identity. You do not chase answers. You rest in the still voice that says, "Be still, and know that I am God." Psalm 46:10. And that knowing, that sacred inner recognition, becomes your greatest wealth. For what could compare to walking daily with the infinite, to carrying the presence with you into every scene, every decision, every moment of the world? This is what the ancient prayer truly unlocks. Not just supply, but intimacy. Not just form, but presence. You may begin by imagining money, or a home, or success, but beneath the form, something even more precious emerges, the deep realization that you are never without Him, that God is not in the result, but in the feeling of fulfillment, in the assumption itself, in the awareness that you and the source are one. You begin to sense it in subtle ways, a quiet joy that bubbles up without cause, a peace that wraps around you as you imagine, a warmth that moves through your body. When you surrender the old story and accept the new, that warmth is not fantasy, it is evidence, it is the presence. And the more you dwell in this sacred union, the less you crave proof from the outer world. You stop asking, "Where is it?" and start knowing, it is done, because you've touched something greater than appearances. You've touched the reality behind all realities. Now your assumptions are no longer desperate, they are declarations made in reverence. Each inner scene becomes a conversation with God, not just about what you desire, but about who you are becoming. You close your eyes, and you see through the veil. You feel yourself clothed in the end, and you hear the still voice say, "Yes, this is who you truly are." And from this holy place, all things are added. But this time, they are not needed to complete you. They come simply to mirror what you already hold within. And as you walk through life clothed in this divine knowing, a question begins to rise, not in fear, but in wonder. If all things flow from this inner communion, then what else can be made new? What other sacred powers might awaken as you dwell more deeply in the secret place?
And if deeper powers awaken in the silence, then you are not merely transforming your world, you are transfiguring your very nature. For to walk in communion is to live in continual resurrection. Each moment becomes a doorway, and each doorway opens into greater light, not because the world has changed, but because your eyes have. The veil is thinning, not out there, but within you. What was once difficult now feels effortless, not because you've grown stronger, but because you've become still. Still enough to hear the language beneath language, still enough to feel the pulse of divine will flowing through your own. And the more you return to this inner sanctuary, the secret place of the Most High, the more you remember your inheritance, not in parts, but in wholeness. You begin to realize that there are powers within you, still dormant, waiting not for permission, but for recognition. Imagination is the first of these, the great formless womb from which all form is born. But beyond imagination is faith, not the faith of trying, or hoping, or reaching, but the faith that knows. Faith is the faculty of resting in the unseen, without tension. It is the divine eye that sees beyond appearances, and calls things that are not as though they were, not in arrogance, but in sacred trust. Now faith is the substance of things hoped for, the evidence of things not seen. Hebrews 11:1. This is not metaphor, it is law. Faith is not blind, it is vision. And as you live in the state of already having, as you breathe the air of the fulfilled wish, and let it nourish your entire being, your faith begins to solidify, not because you are forcing belief, but because you are no longer entertaining the contradiction. You have chosen your dwelling place, and from that place, new powers unfold. You find your attention becoming more refined, more deliberate, no longer scattered by appearances, no longer distracted by the noise of facts. You become the guardian of your own inner temple. Every thought must pass through the gate of assumption. Every feeling is either welcomed or released, based on whether it matches the end you have claimed. This is not discipline, as the world defines it. This is devotion. Devotion to who you truly are. Devotion to the vision you carry. devotion to the presence, who walks with you in silence. And from this devotion comes clarity, a quiet confidence, not the roar of ego, but the stillness of knowing, I and my Father are one. When you walk in this awareness, even the outer noise begins to fade. You find yourself no longer chasing signs, no longer waiting for proof. You are the proof. Your peace is evidence. Your joy is confirmation, and the world must bend. It must yield, not to pressure, but to presence, not to effort, but to the radiant inevitability of your assumption. Because you have remembered the ancient prayer, not just in words, but in being. And yet the beauty of this path is that it never ends in itself. For even as you claim more fully the richness of your own divine identity, something else begins to arise, something quieter, more subtle than all before it. A holy question takes root in the fertile ground of your awareness. If the treasure has always been within, then why was it hidden in the first place? And what purpose did the forgetting serve in the unfolding of the remembering? And if the treasure was hidden, perhaps it was never lost, but only veiled by design. Because forgetting is not failure, it is the beginning of the great return. The descent before the rising, the sleep before the awakening. The seed must fall into the ground and die, or it abides alone. To forget who you are is to descend into limitation, into form, into the appearance of separation. It is to walk among shadows, believing them to be substance. But the forgetting is not punishment. It is the path. For only in forgetting can the joy of remembering be known. Only through the illusion of distance can reunion feel like grace. You were never cast out. You descended willingly, clothed in flesh, that you might rediscover what was always true in spirit. This is the sacred pattern, hidden throughout Scripture, whispered in dreams, echoed in every myth that ever spoke of gods who sleep, heroes who fall, kings who wander the wilderness of their own mind, only to wake again, crowned not by others, but by their own remembrance. You are not here to find riches. You are here to remember that you are the wealth. And when that remembrance takes root, not just as a thought, but as a state, the entire world begins to mirror it back, not to reward you, but to reflect you. The moment you stop looking for the riches and begin living from them, the game changes. This is why desire is holy, not because it points to what is missing, but because it reveals what is sleeping. The longing you feel for abundance, for love, for peace, is not a sign of lack. It is the voice of the divine within, calling you back to the state where that thing already is, where you already are. Desire is memory in disguise, and assumption is its fulfillment. So when you assume the state of the wish fulfilled, you are not adding something new. You are restoring what was temporarily veiled. You are stepping out of the trance of separation and back into your inheritance. And the riches, when they come, for they will come, are not the reward. They are the echo, the ripple sent out from your inner resurrection. This is the deeper meaning of the ancient prayer. It is not a cry for something to descend from heaven, but the quiet ascent of your own soul, the rising of God within you, the lifting of the veil. And the veil was never outside. It was always the state you were consenting to dwell in. But now the veil is thinning. You are beginning to feel the difference between effort and embodiment, between longing and knowing, between asking and being. And in that space, something sacred waits, a final layer of the mystery, not about wealth, but about why you ever left the garden at all, why the law was hidden in flesh, why the prayer begins in darkness, only to end in light. And if the prayer begins in darkness and ends in light, then even the darkness was part of the design, not a mistake, not a fall, but a veiling, a soft descent into form, into matter, into the sleep of forgetting, not so you might suffer, but so that you might awaken. For how could you know the brilliance of the flame, unless you first walked through the shadow? How could you feel the joy of returning, unless you had once believed yourself lost? You descended into the appearance of lack, that you might rise again, in the truth of fullness. You wandered through the world of effects to rediscover yourself as the cause. You clothed yourself in forgetfulness, on purpose, that the remembering might become your glory. This is the mystery the world cannot teach, that even the veil was a gift, even the ache was holy, because beneath it all was always the truth, hidden not to punish, but to preserve, like a treasure, buried deep until the soul is ready to dig, not outward, but inward. And now you're digging with your silence. You're uncovering not with hands, but with attention. You're unearthing gold, by daring to believe that your imagination is the real ground of being. The garden was never taken from you. You simply stopped assuming it was yours. But now, you assume again, not by force, but by rest. You feel the richness already given. You sit within the end, as though you never left it, and in that sitting, something returns, not from above, but from within. The kingdom, the power, the presence, the kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:21, and it always has been. It was never lost. It was simply unrecognized, while you believed the outer world to be master. But the outer world is only echo, and you are the voice that sends the sound. So you begin to speak again, not with lips, but with inner being. You feel the scene. You enter the assumption. You return to the end, and live there, breathe there, sleep there, and something begins to shift, not just in your life, but in your very nature. You become less reactive, less bound by appearance, less seduced by the noise. You become more still, more certain, more radiant, and in that radiance, the things you once chased now begin to come to you, because you no longer need them. You've become the vibration of what they represent: freedom, fulfillment, sufficiency. This is the hidden wealth, not what you own, but what you embody. And now you see, the ancient prayer was never a cry for help, but a declaration of truth. I am not I wish to be, not I hope to receive, simply I am. And when you say it from the end, when you speak it as one already full, the world bends, because it was always your reflection. But the reflection is not the reward is the remembering. And as you rest in that remembering, a final veil prepares to lift, one that reveals not only what you are, but why you came, not merely to receive riches, but to awaken others to their own, not just to live the law, but to embody it so completely that others remember through you. And if others remember through you, then your wealth was never meant to end with you. It was always meant to overflow, because the divine does not gather, it pours. It multiplies through expression, not possession. And when you embody the law, not as theory, but as life, your very presence becomes an atmosphere, a silent invitation for others to awaken. They may not know what changed, they may not speak of it, but something in your stillness stirs something in theirs. Something in your quiet certainty calls them inward. You become the mirror they forgot they were looking for. This is the hidden ministry of assumption, not sermons, not arguments, not persuasion, just embodiment. You walk in the end, and the world around you begins to rearrange itself, not only for your benefit, but for the elevation of those within your field of being, because your assumption does not isolate you, it includes all. And when you imagine lovingly for another, when you assume their healing, their success, their freedom, you are not interfering, you are remembering for them, you are holding the image they may not yet feel worthy to hold, and in doing so, you offer them the greatest gift, the vibration of truth, spoken silently on their behalf. This is the mystical meaning of love thy neighbor as thyself, not as an act of sacrifice, but of vision, of seeing them through the eyes of the fulfilled prayer, of refusing to believe their temporary state is their eternal one. So when you look upon someone struggling, you do not pity, you do not reinforce their limitation with your concern, you enter the silence and feel, deeply, that they already are what they long to become. You see them clothed in light, you hear their voice ringing with joy, you feel their freedom, and you do it all within. And if sustained, it must come to pass, not always through you, not always where you can witness it, but the law never returns void. The seed once planted must bear fruit. Whatever you ask for in prayer, believe that you have received it, and it will be yours. Mark 11:24. This includes the prayers you pray without words. For those who've forgotten, they can still ask. And as you do this, as you make your own inner world a dwelling place of abundance, peace and radiant identity, the people around you begin to change, not because you demanded it, but because your light made their darkness uncomfortable, your wholeness made their lack untenable. You become a living witness to the law, and this is where riches reveal their true purpose, not to separate, but to connect, not to glorify the self, but to restore the collective. Your abundance becomes a beacon, your assumption becomes a bridge. This is the hidden current behind the ancient prayer, that as you awaken to who you are, you become the permission for others to do the same. But there is still one final veil, one more mystery nestled deep within the folds of being. For if your assumption shapes your world, and your world includes every other soul you meet, then what truly is the boundary between the self you assume and the selves you see? Where does your power end? And what if it never did? And if your power never truly ended, then perhaps it never truly began, either, because beginnings and endings belong to time, and you, the real you, are older than time,
deeper than form, vaster than the story you're living. The I am in you was not born, it does not rise and fall, it is the still center around which all movement appears. You are not assuming within the world is unfolding within your assumption. The self you think of as you is but a garment, lovingly woven by your own imagination. The others you see, the places you walk, the events that pass like seasons, all cast by the projector within. They are not separate players, they are masks of your own infinite self. And now you're beginning to feel the truth of it, not as a concept, but as a holy pressure inside your chest, a quiet dissolving of the veil. The one who assumes is the same one who appears as the world. There is no outer and inner, there is only consciousness, shaping itself into infinite forms, and calling it reality. You look upon another, and if you see them rightly, if you see them as whole, radiant, worthy, you are seeing an aspect of yourself. This is why your assumption holds such power, not because you've found a secret to control life, but because you've remembered that you are life, all of it, not just the body you walk in, but the field in which it walks, not just the voice that speaks the prayer, but the silence that hears it. And when this is no longer theory, when it becomes your state, the entire world softens, the striving ends, you no longer seek to get, you no longer race to manifest, you assume with the ease of one who already is, not because you've conquered the world, but because you've withdrawn your belief in separation. You are not the drop, you are the sea, and even the prayer becomes quieter now, no longer a request, no longer a reaching, but a resting, a radiant unfolding of what has always been true beneath appearances. You say I am, and you do not add anything more. You let it echo, you let it fill the space of your being, and everything you need, everything you once sought, begins to bloom from that stillness, not as reward, not as proof, but as reflection. There is no longer a need to push, there is no longer a need to push, there is no longer fear of missing, or delay or denial, there is only now, and in the now, all ends are fulfilled, all promises kept, all riches returned, because you have become the prayer itself. You no longer ask for light, you remember that you are the light, ye are the light of the world. Matthew 5:14. And as that light dawns fully within, something even deeper emerges, not a new layer, but the very root beneath all others, the origin of the ancient prayer, the source of the longing, the reason why you ever dreamed at all. And it speaks, not in language, but in vibration, a question not asked, but known. If all this is within you, then who truly is the dreamer? And why did you choose to dream as a world of many? And if you are the dreamer, then the many forms you've met were never strangers. They were fragments of the one, clothed in the illusion of separation, characters drawn from your own eternal imagination, each revealing to you a different facet of your infinite face. Every friend, every enemy, every beggar and king, not foreign beings, but reflections, echoes of the I am playing out its possibilities in form. This is the great secret that humbles even as it exalts, that the dreamer is not trapped in the dreamer is the dream, and yet remains above it, not imprisoned by what is seen, but free to shift it, recreate it, revise it. And so you dreamed of division, of forgetting, of being a single soul among many, with needs, and longings, and prayers. You dreamed of riches not yet attained, of love not yet returned, of a world that seemed to move apart from you, but none of it was punishment. It was play, it was purpose. The dream of limitation was the womb of awakening, because only through forgetting could you taste the sweetness of remembrance, only through contrast could the light of consciousness reveal itself as all there is. You chose to descend, not to lose yourself, but to find yourself in 1,000 forms, and now the fragments are calling home, the mask is loosening, the prayer is being spoken again, not in desperation, but in glory. I am, spoken not as identity alone, but as unity. Not I am this, or I am that, but I am all, the tree and the wind, the seeker and the seen, the silence and the song. And in this vastness, there is no fear, no striving, no more effort to attain, for how can you acquire what you have always been? You are not manifesting riches from the outside, you are waking up to the knowing that there is no outside. Everything is consciousness, and consciousness is you. This is why assumption works, not because you convince something beyond you, but because there is nothing beyond you. There is no other will, no other source, just the one, dreaming itself into billions of names, and remembering itself again, through yours. And so you rest in the felt knowing that nothing real can be lost, and nothing false can remain. You rest in the deep peace that comes not from control, but from awareness. You rest in the end, not as a strategy, but as your natural place, and in that rest, the ancient prayer fulfills itself, not because it was arisen, but because it was answered, but because it was you, all along. And still, even here, something deeper begins to shimmer, a mystery that cannot be spoken, only entered, a love too vast to define, yet somehow clothed in every assumption, every form, every breath of life, not just the law, but the source behind the law, the beloved presence that has always been with you, watching, waiting, becoming you. And just before the silence returns, it leans in to whisper, what if the prayer is not only about remembering who you are, but about returning to why you chose to be here at all?
And if the prayer is a return not only to who you are, but why you came, then its fulfillment is more than riches. It is remembrance wrapped in purpose. You did not descend into flesh simply to accumulate or to attain. You came to reveal, to radiate, to express the unseen as seen, the formless as form, the eternal as presence. You came to move through the world, not to be defined by it, but to redefine it, not by force, but by vision, by the silent sovereign act of assumption. Because each time you dare to feel from the end, each time you clothe yourself in the state of the fulfilled desire, you are not just receiving, you are revealing what already is in the kingdom within. You are showing the law to be alive, and this is love. Not the fragile kind that waits for approval, but the divine kind that gives because it is. The kind that assumes not only for itself, but for others. That blesses the unseen. That walks through the world with open hands and a heart anchored in the end. You came to be a witness to this law, a living parable, a being who remembers their source and walks among others as if the veil were never drawn. And through your quiet certainty, others begin to remember too. They remember not because you preach, but because your life has become a silent echo of the prayer, I am, I have, I know, I love, I remember. And when you live from that place, the world becomes gentle, circumstances bow, delays dissolve. What once seemed far now rests at your feet, not as a prize, but as a mirror. Because you are no longer living to get, you are living to give form to the invisible, to give life to the Word made flesh. This is why your desires matter. Not because they are ends in themselves, but because they are divine signals, blueprints of remembrance. Each desire is an invitation to step into a state where the truth of who you are becomes visible. Do not ignore them. Do not fear them. Let them guide you inward. You don't fulfill your desires by pursuing them. You fulfill them by assuming them, by entering the end and living from it as naturally as breath. And that end is not a thing. It is a self, a way of being. A garment you wear in consciousness long before it shows itself in form. You do not wait for the world to confirm it. You walk in it. You do not ask for permission. You simply assume the identity and dwell there, in peace, in silence, in unwavering trust. And the world cannot help but yield. Not because you've mastered a technique, but because you've remembered the truth. And the truth makes all things new. But even as all is made new, one last veil remains. A quiet mystery hidden beneath the assumption, beneath the law, beneath the wealth and the awakening. Not what you are, not what you can create, but what waits when all creating has ceased, when all form has fallen away, and only the pure presence remains. The still I am before all things, and yet forever expressing through you. And when all form falls away, what remains? Not silence, but the presence beneath silence. Not stillness as absence, but stillness as origin. A stillness that knows itself, even without thought, even without image, even without name. This is the pure I am, unconditioned. Not I am rich, not I am loved, not even I am becoming. Just I am, without description, without desire, without beginning or end. The root of all states, the light from which every prayer is born, and to which every fulfilled desire returns. And when you touch it, when you sit, not to assume something, but to be, there is no more striving. No more asking, no more even imagining. You are the presence that gives rise to imagination itself. This is not the end of the journey. It is the still point around which all journeys revolve, the axis that never moves. And when you return to this center, this beingness, all else becomes simple, not because life suddenly softens, but because you no longer measure life by outcomes. You measure it by alignment. You begin to sense that the deepest wealth is not in the forms you attract, but in your capacity to rest in this presence, without needing anything to change, to simply dwell in your divine self, and let all that needs to arise, arise from there. This is what it means to inherit the kingdom, not just to manifest results, but to know the eternal within you, the never-changing source behind all changing form, the one who speaks the word, and is the word. Before Abraham was I am, John 8:58, not was, not will be, always am. And as you abide here, not forcing stillness, but surrendering to it, your desires return, but gentler. They rise without urgency. They take shape in the mirror of this presence, not as needs, but as expressions of joy. You no longer try to use the law. You are the law, resting as its source. And from this rest, riches flow freely, not only material, but spiritual, relational, vibrational. Everything begins to harmonize. Not because you've learned to control life, but because you've stopped needing to. You live from the center. You assume without effort. You give without depletion. You walk as the prayer itself, not as one asking, but as one knowing. And still, this presence invites you deeper, into subtler trust, into wider stillness, into the kind of richness that needs no gold to shine. You may still build the life of your dreams. You may still assume homes, wealth, success. But now, none of it holds you. You are no longer entangled in the outcome. You are sourced from within. And what once felt like magic now feels natural, as though all of life were breathing with you, not against you, because it is. And in this union, between self and source, desire and surrender, assumption and being, a new question arises, not from the mind, but from the soul itself. What would it look like to remain here, not just in stillness, but in motion, to live each ordinary moment from this holy place? And if you could remain here, not only in stillness, but in motion, then life itself becomes the temple, no longer divided into sacred and secular, effort and ease, prayer and performance, but made whole, unified. Every gesture becomes liturgy, every breath a benediction. The mundane, touched by presence, becomes radiant. You rise from your seat, and yet you carry the stillness with you. You move through the marketplace, but you are unmoved within. You answer the phone, write the letter, speak to the stranger, and yet beneath each act is the quiet awareness. I am. Not the self you once defended, not the mask the world affirmed, but the unshakable being behind it all. The one who assumes from knowing, not need. The one who creates by resting. This is the true fruit of the prayer, not only that you receive what you once longed for, but that you learn to live as the one who no longer lacks. And it shows, not in words, but in atmosphere, in the way you listen, in the way you walk, in the way you hold even silence, as if it were holy, because it is. You do not need to tell others who you are. They will feel it. They will recognize something, not familiar, but eternal. The light in you calls to the light in them, and it needs no explanation. You carry the end within you. You dwell in it like a robe that fits without stitching, and that robe begins to shape everything around you, not as reaction, but as reflection. You no longer rush. You no longer question your place. You no longer seek confirmation, because you have become the confirmation. Your assumption is no longer something you do. It is what you are. And here you discover the deepest rhythm of all, that you can live fully embodied and fully aware, that the prayer need not be reserved for quiet hours, but can become the constant hum beneath your daily steps. A pulse of presence, a current of knowing. You sip water and feel it as abundance. You open your door and feel it as invitation. You walk into rooms and feel yourself radiating, not as ego, but as essence, because you are no longer living to get. You are living to give form to the divine, and that giving never depletes you. It renews you. The more you give from the state of fullness, the more fullness you realize. The more you assume wholeness for others, the more whole you become. And so the lines blur, the self and the other, the self and the other, the now and the end, the wish and its fulfillment, all become one. And in the oneness, something quiet whispers beneath even the richest manifestations. What if the prayer has no final destination? What if the prayer has no final destination? What if the unfolding itself is the treasure, and you simply are here to walk it awake? And if the unfolding is the treasure, then each moment is sacred, not because of what it brings, but because of what it reveals. There is no arrival, only remembering, no final prize, only deeper presence. And so the ancient prayer, spoken not in haste, but in stillness, becomes your rhythm, not a passage you recite, but a vibration you live. It echoes beneath your assumptions, beneath your breath, beneath your very being. I. Not once, not when needed, but forever.
and from that still, eternal presence, the riches flow, not because you chase them, but because you align with them, because you no longer seek from the state of lack, but receive from the state of being. You are no longer trying to become the one who has, you are the one who is, and the outer world, soft as clay, molds itself around your assumption. But even this is not the miracle is you, walking through form with your eyes fixed on the formless, moving through the dream without falling back to sleep, remaining aware, even as you play your part, that it is all you. This awareness, this living prayer, transforms everything. You speak less, you listen more, you choose your states with care, not to manipulate, but to honor the creative power within. You realize that your assumption is not just shaping outcomes, it is shaping others, not by control, but by invitation, by showing them through your embodiment what is possible. You become a way shower, a mirror of the divine, and this too is part of the riches, because true wealth is not measured by what you possess, but by what flows through you without effort, peace without condition, confidence without arrogance, love without transaction. These are the treasures the world cannot give, and therefore cannot take. You carry them not in hands, but in being, and when you do, when your presence becomes prayer, and your prayer becomes presence, you see clearly that you never needed to reach. You only needed to relax into the truth, that everything you ever asked for was already given, that the law was not far off, but written on your heart, that the kingdom was never behind a gate, but always within your breath. And so you dwell here, gently, naturally, without ceremony or striving. You let the riches appear as they will, and they will, but they no longer define your state, because your state is fixed in the eternal. Your assumption is no longer something to maintain, it is something you have become. And as you move through this world, as the prayer itself, alive and whole, a final wonder begins to rise, soft and bright and silent. What would it mean to live so deeply in the end, that even endings become beginnings, that even fulfillment becomes expansion, that even the most complete desire opens into something more? And if even fulfillment expands, then the end is not a stopping point, but a doorway, a new beginning dressed in the softness of completion, because the moment you fully embody a state, the moment you assume it so completely, that there is no gap between feeling and form, something subtle unfolds. The desire dissolves, yes, but not into stillness, into invitation, not for more of the same, but for more of the divine. The soul is not static, it does not gather riches to rest, it reveals riches to rise, not in pursuit, but in expansion, not to add more, but to express more deeply. And so from the fullness of one end, a new vision begins to rise, not from lack, but from grace. This is the rhythm of true creation, not striving to arrive, but arriving to expand, being fulfilled, and from that fulfillment, overflowing. Just as the ocean does not stop at the shore, but sends its waves forward endlessly, so does your being press gently into ever greater embodiment of the I Am. You thought the ancient prayer would lead you to a final destination, but now you see, it is alive, it breathes, it moves. It is not one statement, but a fountain, and each time you return to it, I am, you draw from it something new, a new expression, a new embodiment, a new state that was waiting beneath the last, like light hidden inside light. This is why manifestation never ends, not because you are ungrateful, but because you are infinite. You are not meant to stop, you are meant to flow, to become, to shine. And as you assume, and fulfill, and rest, you awaken to even greater dreams, not born from lack, but from divine longing. Longing not as need, but as movement, the pull of the divine to know itself in fuller form. And so the riches continue, they evolve with you, they follow the thread of your identity, always rising to meet the self you've dared to become. You are no longer trying to fix your life, you are expressing the infinite through your own unique form. Your desires are no longer burdens, they are beacons. You are not getting what you want, you are remembering what God longs to become through you. And in this you realize the highest wealth is not something you possess, it is something you give room to. The space you offer in your consciousness becomes the soil in which the divine plants itself. And so you continue, you assume new ends, not in hunger, but in joy. You claim new states, not in fear, but in worship. And with each new becoming, the prayer renews itself, not as repetition, but as revelation. revelation. This is the eternal unfolding. This is the real inheritance. And in the quiet between assumptions, when the world grows still, and the air softens with presence, a final question begins to rise, not as a challenge, but as a promise. What becomes possible when you no longer create from desire, but from remembrance of the one who dreamed you into being? And if you are no longer creating from desire, but from remembrance, then the act of creation becomes communion, no longer a reaching, but a return, no longer a hunger, but a harmony. You begin to sense that every assumption is not merely a movement of mind, but a reunion, a sacred meeting between your form and your formless origin. You assume, not to obtain, but to echo. You speak the end, not to command, but to resonate with what the divine has already chosen through you. The imagined scene becomes an altar, the felt state becomes an offering, and your entire being, quiet and surrendered, becomes the temple in which God remembers himself. You are not here to force manifestations into place. You are here to become transparent to the dreamer within, the I am, that imagined you long before you imagined a single thing. And when you let go of ownership, when you no longer say this is mine, but rather this flows through me, all things begin to come with gentleness, with grace, with order. You are no longer asking what do I want, but what is being revealed through me now? What has the dreamer placed in my heart, not as a demand, but as a promise? This is how desire transforms. It no longer whispers of lack, it begins to sing of destiny, and the prayer changes with it. No longer a formula, no longer a repetition, but a surrender, so soft it feels like remembering something you never truly forgot, a falling inward to the center of all being, where no need can survive, and only knowing remains. And that knowing, that sacred inner yes, becomes your seed, your wealth, your supply. For when you know who you are, everything else begins to rise and take shape around that knowing. All things were made by him, and without him was not anything made that was made. John 1:3. That him is not outside of you, it is the I am within, eternal awareness, clothed in your name, walking your path, dreaming through your form, and now you're beginning to feel the truth of it not as doctrine, but as breath. You do not need to figure out how the dream will unfold. You need only yield to its vibration, feel it, live from it, let it settle into your bones, until you no longer distinguish between imagination and reality, because you have realized they were never separate. You are not here to prove your worth through creation. You are here to reveal worth by resting in what you already are, and the rest does the work. This is why your assumptions hold power, not because they trick the universe into giving, but because they align you with what the universe already is. And when you remember this, deeply, calmly, not in the mind, but in the body, in the breath, everything softens. You begin to move through life, like a wave that knows the tide is in its favor. You carry your end, like an aroma. You walk through the world, as the fulfilled promise, and life responds accordingly. But even in this fulfillment, the dreamer has more to give, not in form alone, but in essence, in revelation, in expansion. And so the question arises again, not to unsettle you, but to awaken you. If the dreamer is still dreaming through you now, what higher state is waiting to be worn? What unseen glory is quietly asking to be assumed?
And if a higher state is waiting to be worn, it will not come with noise, but with nudges. Not in the shout of striving, but in the hush of readiness. You begin to feel it like a breeze, faint but undeniable, brushing the edges of your present identity. A gentle prompting, not from without, but from the dreamer within, whispering, there is more. Not more to have, but more to be. And this more is not ambition, it is remembrance. You are not reaching up to grasp a new self. You are sinking inward to recognize it. The version of you who already walks in deeper peace, speaks from deeper authority, gives from deeper supply. The you who no longer asks if the prayer will be answered, but knows that you are the answer. And so the assumption deepens. It becomes less a practice and more a posture, a way of holding your being from within, not rigid, but surrendered, not fixed, but faithful. You close your eyes, not to escape the world, but to see it rightly. You drop into that place where all things are known before they appear, where identity flows like light through glass, shaping reality with no effort but its own clarity. And here, you ask nothing. You do not even need to affirm. You receive the state, like putting on a new garment already tailored to your shape. It fits because it was always yours. You feel what it feels like to be that version of you, the one whose riches are not counted in coins, but in consciousness. The one who walks into every room with quiet certainty. The one whose relationships reflect harmony, whose body radiates ease, whose presence causes things to bloom, not because they strive, but because they are. This is the state calling to you now, not for you to earn it, but for you to assume it. And it may feel unfamiliar at first, not because it is foreign, but because you've grown used to the smaller garment, the older version of you, the limited posture, the subtle waiting. But you are not waiting anymore. You are remembering forward. You are choosing the end, not as a tactic, but as truth. Put ye on the Lord Jesus Christ. Romans 13:14. To put on a state is not metaphor. It is the act of creation. When you wear the identity fully, the world must clothe itself around it. So now you ask not, how will this happen, but how does it feel to already be it? And you stay there, long enough for the feeling to settle, long enough for the old version to fall silent, long enough for the dreamer to speak, not in words, but in being. And when you rise from that place, you do so differently. You don't announce the change, you walk it. You let your steps be shaped by the new assumption. You respond from it. You expect from it. And the world, still malleable, begins to conform. But this time, your eyes are not on the reflection. They're anchored in the radiance within, the source of it all. And in that radiance, another question ripples through the stillness. What if the most powerful prayer isn't the one that gets answered, but the one that transforms who you are as you continue to assume it? And if the most powerful prayer is the one that transforms who you are, then fulfillment is not measured by what arrives, but by what awakens. You are no longer seeking confirmation from the mirror. You are becoming the reflection of your own inner word, not just spoken, but lived. The world is not your validator, it is your echo. And as you assume the state, again and again, something subtle begins to change, not in your outer world first, but in the texture of your being. The old hesitations quiet, the waiting dissolves. What once felt like effort now feels like rhythm, and the rhythm feels like home. You have entered the prayer, you are no longer using it, you are it. The state you assumed has become your dwelling place. It is no longer something you visit in silence. It has become the atmosphere through which you see, speak, move and receive. It colors every perception, it shapes every response. And not because you maintain it with strain, but because it now feels more natural than what came before. This is identity shift. Not a change in circumstance, though that surely comes, but a change in the one who walks through circumstance. And in that change, the world bends, quietly and completely. But more than that, you bend, toward grace, toward joy, toward the silent knowing that you lack nothing. You begin to understand, the true riches weren't what the state produced, but what the state revealed in you. You were never asking for things. You were asking to remember who you already are, when you stopped doubting, delaying or dividing your awareness. And now you remember, not in flashes, but in presence. You walk as the prayer. You breathe as the end. You carry yourself like the promise fulfilled, not out of pride, but out of reverence. The God you once sought outside now moves through your limbs, whispers through your voice, chooses through your imagination. And what could be richer than this? To know that every act of assumption draws more of the divine into form, not as a thing to chase, but as you, becoming. This is why the prayer was given, not to ask, but to become. Whatsoever ye shall ask in prayer, believing ye shall receive. Matthew 21:22. And now you understand, the one who believes fully, becomes the one who no longer asks. The prayer fulfilled is no longer repeated. It becomes breath, movement, rhythm. It becomes who you are. So let yourself rest there now, not in the hope of getting, but in the delight of being. Let the state hold you. Let the I am speak through you, without commentary, without hesitation. And as you rest in that stillness, something more ancient than words begins to rise. The sense that you have never been apart from your answered prayer, only asleep to the truth, that it was always you. And with that awakening, a final soft wonder begins to dawn, not as another question, but as a sacred invitation. What if the truest riches were not what you could manifest, but who you are, when there is nothing left to prove? And if there is nothing left to prove, then the striving quiets, and the soul begins to sing, not loudly, not with fanfare, but with a deep golden hum that trembles beneath every moment. You feel it in the silence between thoughts, in the gentle breath before sleep, in the pause that stretches long enough for you to notice. You are already whole. You are not lacking faith. You are remembering how it feels to be complete. This is the hidden wealth, not what the world defines, not what comes and goes, but what remains when all effort fades. The wealth of knowing, not intellectually, but in your bones, in your breath, in the stillness behind your eyes, that you are already one with your desire. The old idea that you must prove your worth dissolves here, like fog before the morning sun, because worth cannot be proven, it can only be known, and once known, it becomes the ground of all creation. From that ground, prayer no longer rises as petition, it becomes expression, an overflowing, a declaration of what already is, spoken not to convince the world, but to confirm to the self, I am. And when you say it now, it no longer trembles with doubt, it carries the steady pulse of authority, not forceful, not proud, but clear. You are not hoping, you are inhabiting. You are no longer in a state of becoming, you are in a state of being, and that being is the prayer fulfilled. You begin to understand the ancient words in a new light. Before they call, I will answer, and while they are yet speaking, I will hear. Isaiah 65:24. This is not a promise from afar, it is the reflection of your own divine nature. The moment you assume the end, fully, faithfully, deeply, the answer is already born within you. It moves through you before it moves around you. It is heard, not by some external force, but by the I am within. So now, every time you enter the silence, you do not beg for change. You return to remembrance. You see the scene. You feel the state. You taste the peace of the thing already done. And as you open your eyes, you carry that peace with you, not as something fragile, but as something fond. You walk differently. You speak with calm conviction. You respond to the world from your assumption, not from your observation. And the world, obedient to the inner mold, takes shape without resistance, because the true riches respond not to effort, but to identity. And your identity has shifted. It is no longer shaped by circumstance, but by choice. You have chosen to dwell in the end, not visit it, not glance at it longingly, but live there. You are not waiting for evidence. You are being the evidence. You are not tracking progress. You are the arrival point. And this too is wealth, not in what you gain, but in what you release. For when there is nothing left to chase, you find yourself face to face with the original promise, not whispered, not written, but woven into the very breath of creation. You are, and always have been, enough. And yet something stirs, soft as a feather falling in a dream, a quiet pull, not backward into old lack, but forward into a deeper wonder. If you are already enough, then what might flow through you when you finally allow yourself to become overflowing? And when you allow yourself to become overflowing, the nature of prayer shifts once more, from desire to devotion, from request to radiant release. You begin to understand, this sacred current, this divine abundance that moves through you, is not meant to be stored, but shared, not in obligation, not in martyrdom, but in joy, in ease, in the gentle knowing that what flows through you can never run dry. You have become the open vessel, the temple without walls, the wellspring, whose only task is to stay open. This is the hidden motion of the ancient prayer, not a chant to bend the heavens, but a quiet agreement with your own divine rhythm. You are not calling down blessings, you are letting them rise from the deep reservoir of your I am, where all is already complete. You do not overflow because you have much, you overflow because you are much, you overflow because you are much. And that muchness is not noise, it is presence, not striving, stillness, not accumulation, awareness. You overflow when you stop damming the river of imagination with fear, when you no longer tighten your hands around what is already yours, when you trust that what is real in consciousness must appear in time, not as a reward, but as reflection. And so you rest, even in the midst of movement. You give, even as you receive. You walk, not as one who needs proof, but as one who knows. My cup runneth over. Psalm 23:5. This is not a metaphor. It is the state of consciousness that arises when you finally let go of the illusion of lack. You are not trying to convince yourself that you are blessed. You are allowing yourself to feel it. You breathe in the richness of life, not things, but being, not events, but essence. You walk through ordinary moments with the quiet majesty of one who remembers, I and the Father are one. And in that unity, everything becomes sacred. Your words carry weight. Your silence carries peace. Your steps echo with the resonance of the end already fulfilled. You are not chasing blessings. You are being one, and others feel it, though they may not understand it. They are drawn not to what you have, but to what you radiate, to the still joy,
the unshakable poise, the effortless grace, that only comes from inner union. This is the wealth that cannot be stored in banks, but it multiplies wherever you place your attention, because attention is your spiritual currency. What you dwell upon, you embody. What you embody, you express. What you express, you attract. And so your very being becomes magnetic, not to prove anything, not to compete, but to remind the world what is possible when one no longer resists their divine identity. The prayer, then, becomes a posture, a way of standing inside yourself, open to receive, open to pour, open to become. And in that posture, a gentle invitation emerges, not loud, not urgent, but luminous. What happens when you stop measuring your life by results and start measuring it by receptivity? If the true measure is receptivity, then you begin to see the prayer not as something you give, but something you allow. For to receive, purely, gently, wholly, is to say yes to the divine image already formed within. It is to stop rehearsing the absence and to relax into the presence. It is to open your hand, unclench your mind, and soften your heart enough to feel the arrival before it appears in form. And here, the stillness grows more alive. You are no longer searching for signs, because the sign is already within you. The mood of the answered prayer, the tone of fulfillment, the atmosphere of peace, it floods you, not because you finally deserved it, but because you finally allowed it. You are not earning your desires. You are remembering they were yours from the beginning, planted in the garden of consciousness, long before time gave them language. They are not random wishes. They are holy seeds, whispering, "Let me be born through you." And the womb of manifestation is not effort, it is acceptance. You become the fertile soil when you cease doubting your worth, when you welcome the end as already yours, when you no longer filter what is possible through the lens of history or logic or delay. You accept with the innocence of a child and the confidence of a God, and something shifts. You notice the soft glimmer of evidence, not always outside, not at first, but inside, a new lightness, a deeper calm, a sense that the inner atmosphere has changed. You are not thinking your way into riches, you are resting into them, because reception is rest. It is surrender without loss, yielding without passivity. It is the soul opening its palms and saying, "It is finished," before anything has outwardly begun. And yet in that stillness, it has already begun. The ancient prayer is now living in you, not repeated, but realized, not spoken toward the heavens, but breathed within the heart. You no longer need to convince yourself. You are letting the feeling rise until it convinces the world. You embody it in silence. You carry it in your gaze. You do not boast. You do not plead. You assume. And assumption, when made in love, is the highest act of receptivity. You are saying, "I believe so deeply in what I am, that I no longer need to prepare for it. I simply am it." And the world, obedient to your radiance, arranges itself accordingly. This is the mystery the world overlooks, that true wealth is not something you store or earn, but something you become available for, not through strain, but through spiritual alignment. You are already aligned when you stop contradicting the feeling of the wish fulfilled. You are already aligned when you forgive the past its weight and the future its pressure. You are already aligned when you enter the inner sanctuary and dare to say, "Thank you," before it comes. And here, even deeper, a sacred truth unfurls like incense in a temple. Perhaps the final form doesn't matter as much as the state it called you to remember. Perhaps every desire is just a bridge, leading you back to the I am, not as an idea, but as an indwelling presence, which invites a holy question to rise from the stillness. What if the ancient prayer was never meant to get you more, but to return you to who you already are? When you finally stop asking, and when you finally stop asking, something ancient and eternal begins to rise, not with thunder, not with spectacle, but with the quiet weight of truth remembered. It does not come from above, nor from without. It blooms from within. You realize then, the prayer was never about the words. It was the state beneath the words, a state of union, of stillness, of recognition. The prayer was always a mirror, not to reflect your need, but to reveal your nature. You were never calling something to you. You were awakening to what was already here. And so the asking ends, not from lack of care, but from fullness. Because what you were seeking is no longer separate from what you are. The separation was the illusion, the longing was the veil, and the moment you released it, not by effort, but by assumption, the veil tore, and the kingdom was revealed. You begin to live without efforting. You begin to receive without seeking. You begin to move through the world, not as a seeker of riches, but as the source through which riches reveal themselves. You understand now, in your breath, in your being, in your quiet certainty, that you are the temple, the voice, the word made flesh. You are the answered prayer, walking in time. To prove something, not to fix something, but to become aware of the truth that has always been. The kingdom of God is within you. Luke 17:21. It is not coming, it is not hiding, it is not waiting for conditions, it is present, living, breathing through your own awareness. And the riches, they come not because you desired well, but because you dwelt well, because you became still enough to remember the law, because you stopped speaking against the fulfillment, because you entered the state and called it home. And so your life now becomes prayer in motion. Each step, a verse, each breath, a sanctuary, each moment, a return to the Holy of Holies, the inner chamber, where you and God are one imagination, one awareness, one unfolding. You are not creating reality. You are accepting your role as consciousness made visible. You are not climbing toward heaven. You are awakening as it. And the ancient prayer, it is no longer something you practice. It is something you are. The words may fall silent, but the state remains. And in that state, you know, the riches you sought were never possessions, but positions, states of being that had always been yours, waiting for the garment of assumption to clothe them in flesh. And now, you wear them lightly, you walk gently, you rest more, you radiate not from effort, but from identity. You are not empty, hoping to be filled. You are overflowing, quietly, steadily, peacefully, like a river that forgot it was once a drop. This is the final answer to the ancient prayer. There was never anything to get, only something to remember. And now, having remembered, you rest. And in your rest, the world rearranges itself to mirror your inner stillness. And in that stillness, you are free.